Any cartels in the house? Huh? Where are you from? Oh, Tucson. I first visited Tucson Temple December 71. Yeah, it was a really nice brahmachari who was in charge, and fortunately died in a car accident a year or two later. Very nice devotee. It's a very nice center. Okay. Strike up the band. Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava. Whoops. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Jashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana. Jashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Jashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana. Sudanandana Jashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Sudanandana Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Charyastu Tarasatasi Simad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swamin Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Charyastu Tarasatasi Simad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem Sakaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Siddhaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Mayapur Dham ki jai, Jagannath Swami ki jai, Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktarinda ki jai. All glories of the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. So, we're going to be reading Srimad Bhagavatam 1:3-31. Here for now. It's a horse collar. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Yatha Navasi. There we go. Just now coming. Mega, Ogha. This is the original form of the words before Sandhi. Renur, Va, Parthivo, Anile, Evang, Drastari, Drishyatvam, Aropitam, Abudhibihi, Yatha Navasi Meghau Gho, Yatha Navasi Meghau Gho, Renur Va Parthivo Nile, Renur Va Parthivo Nile, Evang Drashtari Drishyatvam, Aropitam Abudhivi. So, ladies, gentlemen, Yatha Navasi Megaugo, Renurva Parthivo Nile, Evam Drashtari. Navasi Megaugo, Renurva, Evam Drashti, Yatha Navasi Megaugo, Renurva Parthivo Nile, Evam Drashtari Drishyatam, Aropitam Abudhivi. Yatha Navasi Megaugo, Renurva Parthivo Nile, Evam Drashtari Drishyatam, Yatha Navasi Megaugo, Renurva Parthivo Nile, Evam Drashtari Drishyatam, Aropitam Abudhi. So, here we go. So, word for word, Yatha means as it is, Nabasi in the sky, Mega Ogaha, a mass of clouds, Renu Dasva, as well as Parthiva, muddiness, Anile in the air, evam thus drashtari to the seer, drishyatvam for the purpose of seeing. Aropitam is implied, abudhi by the less intelligent persons. Prabhupada's translation. Clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self. So, Prabhupada's purport. It is further confirmed herein that with our material eyes and senses, we cannot see the Lord, who is all spirit. We cannot even detect the spiritual spark which exists within the material body of the living being. We look to the outward coverings of the body or subtle mind of the living being, but we cannot see the spiritual spark within the body. So we have to accept the living being's presence by the presence of his gross body. Similarly, those who want to see the Lord with their present material eyes or with the material senses are advised to meditate on the gigantic external feature called the Virat Rupa. For instance, when a particular gentleman goes in his car, which can be seen very easily, we identify the car with the man within the car. When the president goes out in his particular car, we say, "There's the president." For the time being, we identify the car with the president. Similarly, less intelligent people who want to see God immediately without necessary qualification are shown first the gigantic material cosmos as the form of the Lord, although the Lord is within and without. The clouds in the sky and the blue of the sky are better appreciated in this connection. Although the bluish tint of the sky and the sky itself are different, we conceive of the color of the sky as blue, but that is a general conception for the layman only. So, Navam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyvari Paschatya Deshatarine. So to understand this verse, we have to understand something about the Samkhya analysis of the material world. So go back to the Sanskrit, please. Okay. So these words, navas, which here is in the locative form, navasi, in the sky, space. The word navas, translated here, navasi, in the sky. Here, navasi, in the sky, is referring not simply to the sky in an ordinary sense, but the fifth of the great or gross physical elements, earth, water, fire, air, and sky. And mega, oga, like a mass of clouds. Mega means clouds, oga means a mass. So the idea here, and this example is also given in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 9. Is there a Gita here? It must be. It's a Hare Krishna temple. There has to be a Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So first, that's fine. Yeah, turn to 9:4. So the example is being given here is an example which is given in the Gita and other places. It's sort of like a standard example that's given. Okay, just go here. Thank you. So to understand this, you have to understand the nature of sky or space in the Samkhya system. The idea is that of the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, these elements actually interact. They affect each other. For example, if you take earth and mix it with water, you get mud or muddy water. You get muddy earth or a muddy water or just, muddy earth. So, and then you take earth, water, fire. So fire, obviously, you can use fire interacts with earth to produce clay, or fire evaporates water, and then you get air. Air oxidizes, different elements of earth. Anyways, you get the idea. So the first four elements interact, whereas the fifth element does not. Space, it simply contains everything. Dhatar, chidra dhatar tvam. In the third canto of the Bhagatam, the function of space is defined by Lord Kapila as chidra dhatartvam, giving and opening for things to exist. For example, our bodies right now are existing in space. And so the easy proof that space is actually an element, even if it's void, even if there's nothing in the space, is that even if you're, let's say, in outer space, as we call it, where let's say where there's no air, there's no atmosphere, nothing, you can still measure it. So you can't measure something if it doesn't exist. And we actually can measure space. So space is the only one of the 5 gross elements that it contains everything but doesn't interact. The fact that Earth is in space does not affect the Earth, and it doesn't affect the space. They have mutually, there's no effect. Same thing with water, fire, air. And so Krishna uses this example, or this fact, that you can have something which contains something else, and yet there's no interaction between it. And Krishna uses this to explain his relationship to the material world. Sorry. So I'm going to read the verse. Actually, it begins in chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, text 4. And you'll see how Krishna's explaining exactly what I just said, and then how it applies to this verse here, to understand what Krishna's actually saying, or what the Bhagavatam is saying. So 9.4 in the Bhagavad Gita is, Maya tatam idang sarvam jagat avyakta murtina, which means idang jagat, idang sarvam jagat. This whole world, which can mean the universe or the planet, just like in English you say, the whole world, it can mean the earth or it can mean the universe. So it's the same in Sanskrit. So idang sarvam jagat, this whole world, tatam, is pervaded, maya, by me. Jagat avyakta murtina, by my unmanifested form. Unmanifested. In other words, there's a form of Krishna which is invisible to us because we are works in progress right now, and our consciousness is impure. But Krishna says, by me, in an unmanifested form, avyakta murti, you know the word murti, which means a form. So by me and my avyakta murti, this whole world is pervaded. And then Krishna says, matstani sarvabhutani. Sarvabhutani, all beings, matstani, stand in me. That's obviously where we get the English word stand from, Sanskrit stani. So, all beings stand in me, or in Sanskrit that's a way of saying all beings exist in me. Na chaham teshu avastita, but I, and actually literally, and I am not situated in them. So now Krishna makes this first point, and then he's going to build on this. So the first point Krishna makes is that I pervade this entire universe in an unmanifested form, and all beings stand in me, but I am not situated in them. They are in me, I am not in them. But then Krishna says, these are some of the most important ontological verses in the Gita, explaining the nature of existence. Then Krishna says, Nacha matstani bhutani, that the beings are not standing in me. So this is called a paradox. A paradox is an apparent contradiction which, upon deeper study, turns out not to be a contradiction. That's a paradox. And it's what I call a literary speed bump. So you actually have to stop and think. You actually have to stop and think. You can't just, rush over these verses. And you find this, obviously, the same kind of paradoxical language which forces you to slow down and actually think, if you are inclined to think. In the Upanishad, tadejati tanaijati, that absolute truth moves and doesn't move. Tadure, tadvantike, it is far away, it is very close, and so on. So this is, or for example, in the Bhagatam, ajo jatam, the unborn is born. So this is intentional paradoxical language. And so here Krishna says, matstani sarvabhutani, that all beings stand in me, but nacha matstani bhutani. The beings don't stand in me. So here you have to, this is not a contradiction. It doesn't violate Aristotle's rule of non-contradiction, that something cannot be one thing and its opposite at the same time in the same relevant manner. So in philosophy, you cannot say, for example, this is green, this is not green, in the same relevant way. If you say this is green, this is not green, you have to be indicating in different ways. It's green in one way, and in another way it's not green. So that's how you resolve a paradox and show it's not contradictory, by showing that these apparently opposite statements are actually indicating different aspects of something. And that's what Krishna is doing here by this paradox. Nacha matstani bhutani. So now Krishna is going to explain the paradox. Actually, there's real philosophy in the Bhagavad Gita, believe it or not just doctrine. So Krishna says, Nacha matstani bhutani pashyame yogam aishwaram. Behold my, how does Prabhupada translate mystic opulence? Yogam can be power, mystic power, and Aishwaram. Aishwara, of course, obviously comes from the word Ishwara. And so Aishwara means like governing or controlling. So behold my governing, my mystic power, which actually governs the universe. And now Krishna is going to explain the paragraph, because he's calling this apparent contradiction. Oh, back. Where are we? Yeah, we're 9.5. Go to the verse 9.5. 9.5. The Sanskrit verse. Yeah, we're talking about the Sanskrit here. So nacha matstani bhutani. The beings do not stand in me. Pashyame. So what is the yogam aishwaram? Krishna is saying the resolution of this apparent contradiction is his governing mystic power. His mystic power which controls the universe. So he says, Bhuta Bhren, this word which would be pronounced Brin, but actually the real pronunciation is burn. It's like the English word burn. That's the vowel R. I won't go into my whole campaign about what the real vowel R is. So Bhuta Bhren, Nacha Bhuta stop, the word burn, actually that's how you pronounce it, believe it or not. Because of vowel R. We have the vowel R, by the way, in English. And I can give an example. The vowel R in English, not in the spelling, because English spelling is completely wacko. But phonetically, in terms of phonetic analysis, we'll take the word bird. What's the vowel in the word bird? It's not the I phonetically, because that would be beard, which is something else. You've got a beard. So the actual vowel in the word bird is the R. That's the vowel R phonetically. So anyway, so bhuta, bhren, nacha, bhuta, and we have this in English by the word bear, like to bear one's suffering, or to bear a heavy weight. So that English word bear, in the sense of to bear something, is Sanskrit, bird. It's the same word. We still have in English from the Sanskrit. Anyway, so bhuta, bhren, I bear, or I sustain, I'm living beings, but I'm not in them. So Krishna is saying, he says, mamatma bhuta bhavana, which literally means that myself, mama atma, myself is bhuta bhavana, which literally means myself causes beings to be. Because when I translate the Gita, because Krishna is using words that it's a very tight argument. And so Krishna is using two forms of the same verbal root. The word bhuta is, of course, from the Sanskrit root bhu, which means to be. That's where we get the be and to be, or to exist. And then bhavana, obviously from the same root. So a simple way to translate this very literally is, I cause beings to be. That's actually what Krishna is saying. I cause beings to be. Myself causes beings to be. And so Krishna is saying that all beings are me in the sense that their existence is resting on my existence. Not in the sense that they're physically standing on me. It's not that Krishna's lying down somewhere in the universe and everyone's just like walking around on Krishna. Or it's not that, so they're not literally standing on him, and that's what Krishna's, so Krishna is actually giving a very, well, brilliant, expect no less from God, he's giving this very brilliant argument in which he's using words in a very literal way. And so sta, again, is English stand. That's where we get the English word stand or status and situate and so on, all those words. So Krishna is saying that all beings stand in me. They don't stand in me, but I am, and I stand in beings. That nacha bhutasta. I do not stand in beings because I bear them, I sustain them. Their existence depends on my existence. I cause beings to be. So this is actually very sophisticated philosophy. It's very sophisticated and very, you could say, somewhat technical philosophy, which is in the Bhagavad Gita. And if we understand it clearly, then we can actually present it to educated people and show them that there's very serious philosophy in the Bhagavad Gita. So having said all that, that's then you go to the next one, which is 9.6. And now Krishna is going to specifically use a language of the sky, which comes directly to the verse that we have here. So Krishna says, yatha, just as. This is introducing an analogy. The Sanskrit word yatha, just as the English just as, introduces an analogy. So yatha, just as, akasha stito nityam vayuk sarvatra go mahan, just as the great wind. And the great wind is, in Sanskrit, a way of saying the atmosphere. In other words, we're not talking about the wind that's, blowing across your neighborhood park, but we're talking here about the great wind, which means the atmosphere. And so just as you could say the great wind, vayu sarvatra go, which goes everywhere. Just as the great wind that goes everywhere, nityam is always stitaha, situated in akasha. Akasha means space or sky. It's a direct synonym of the word we have in today's Bhagatam verse, nabasi. So it's the same. It's a direct synonym. So just as the great air, the atmosphere, is always, which goes everywhere, is always situated in space, tata. So tata completes the analogy. So in Sanskrit, yatha tata, just as this, tata, in that way, something else. So tata is completing the analogy here. So tata, in that way, sarvani bhutani, all beings, matstani, stand in me, iti upadharya, thus understand. Understand it in this way. So it's the same example we have in this Bhagavatam verse, that Krishna is not physically in contact with living beings. That would be like really gross. To be in touch with our sweaty bodies and everything. So, and it's interesting that Krishna gets at the same point, actually earlier in chapter 7, when he says, Bhumi Arapo Analo Vayu Kam and so on, the earth, water, fire, and so on. He said, this is my binna prakriti. It's my separated energy. The word, just like our philosophy is beta, different and non-different, or separate and not separate. So it's the same word, binna is the same word as beta. Beta means separation, binna means separated in Sanskrit. It's just the past passive participle, as you obviously noticed. So therefore, Krishna describes matter as bhinna, separate, beta. And then he describes us as aparayamita sanyang prakriting vidime param. I have another prakriti, another nature, energy, which is living, which is alive. So in other words, it's implicit, very clearly implicit, number one, that matter is not alive. It's literally dead matter. Because Krishna says I have these two different prakritis. One of them is alive, meaning obviously the other one isn't. And just as Krishna says that the inferior energy is bhinna, separated, we are not separated. Because despite all of our foolishness at the present time, ontologically, we are ontologically not separate from God, even though we are psychologically separate. What that means is, psychologically, within our mind, we tend to see ourselves as separate from God, especially when we think we're doing really well and people are giving us attention and so on and so forth. Actually, you could say, when people sneeze, you could say arogyam, health, like they say salud in Spanish. Anyway, so we are not, but ontology means existence itself. So in terms of our existence itself, as spiritual beings, we are not separated from Krishna. In terms of our mental state, we are separate in the sense that we are forgetting Krishna. So we are psychologically separate, but not ontologically separate. This is philosophy. So, anyway, so Krishna says here, he's giving this example, that he said just as, because when Krishna says just as the great air, the atmosphere, which goes everywhere, is always situated in space, you're supposed to understand, because when people hear Bhagavad Gita, you're supposed to understand Samkhya philosophy. It's sort of taken for granted that you know Samkhya philosophy, which explains that space does not interact with any of the elements. It's the only one of the five great material elements. It doesn't interact. So that's what's going on here. And so Krishna says, Yatha kashastito nityam vayuk sarvatra go mahan tatan, that way sarvani bhutani, all beings, matstani, stand in me, idu badarya. They're not physically standing in me. So anyway, those three very important philosophical verses, ontological verses, explain basically the nature of existence. And so now let's go back to the Bhagatam verse. Take this. Now we'll go back to the Bhagatam verse and we'll see how the Bhagatam verse is using this same logic. And also, the reason I chose this verse today is, among other reasons, because it's very cutting edge contemporary psychology. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we go over this verse. So let's look at what this verse says in a very literal way. So yata nabasi. So remember what we just talked about. Nabas, a direct synonym of akasha. It means sky, space. Sky in Sanskrit does not mean the atmosphere. It doesn't mean the air. It means the space itself that contains air and contains everything else. So yata nabasi, just as in space, mega oga. Oga means a mass of something, and mega means clouds. There's a mass of clouds in space. Or, and so, okay, let's complete the verse, and then you'll understand why Krishna is giving this example. Or Renur va parthivo nile. Or anila. Anila means air. So Krishna's going, this verse is going down the elements from subtle to gross. So just as in space, the most subtle of the material elements, there is a mass of clouds, like thick clouds. That's what it means. Or Renur va parthiva, or there is dust, which is parthiva. Parthiva means earthly. One common word, the word prithu in Sanskrit actually means very broad, expansive. And so the word prithivi, or prithvi, literally means the wide earth. That's what that means. You know this word, prithivi, the earth. Prithivite ache jata nagaradigram. So Prithvi means the wide earth, the broad earth. And so in air, there is earthly or dust. Now, the reason this example is given is because Anila is one of the 5 gross elements, but Parthiva, rain or Parthiva, sort of like earthly, is a different element. And so when we say, as Prabhupada explains, the air is dusty, air is not actually dusty, because air itself, as a pure element, is not dusty. The dust is a different element, which is earth. And similarly, avam, so 2 examples are given where, and so avam, in that way, so avam is the same as tata, it just means thus. So when you see avam, so yata, just as, and so just as, this analogy, the analogy can be completed by the word tata, or it can be completed by avam. It means the same thing. So just as this, so that. So that's how you do an analogy. So avam, in that way, drashtari, in the seer. The word drashtari literally means in the seer. This is from the verb drish, to see, like the word darshana, seeing, and so on. So in the seer, drishya tvam, the state of being the object of seeing, aropitam is imposed abudhibi, by basically brainless people, by people with unintelligent people. So what does this mean? And here we get into contemporary psychology. In contemporary psychology, they would call it objectifying someone. You've ever heard that term? Objectifying someone is not, it doesn't mean in a positive sense seeing them objectively. What it means is seeing someone as an object of your consciousness or your pleasure, as opposed to seeing the person as the subject of their own life. Actually, anyone know the great Western philosopher that talks about this? Okay, to win a prize. Sorry, no one. This is Vaishnava Jeopardy. The philosopher is Kant, who said that you should see everyone as the subject of their own life, not as an object of your enjoyment. So that whole thing, don't treat me like an object, like I'm a person, that's all coming, that's in the Bhagavatam. Because if I see you as an object of my consciousness, what that means is, that means that I just see you as something which is supposed to gratify my consciousness, rather than seeing you as the subject of your own consciousness with your own self-interest, your own purpose. And your purpose is not just to gratify my purpose or my consciousness. So seeing someone as a subject and not as an object means Krishna consciousness. Because what is lust? To give it sort of a gross example, disgusting example, take lust, material lust. It means that someone, let's say a man sees a woman, not as a subject of her own life, with her own self-interest, with her own purpose, but rather simply as something that exists to gratify that man's consciousness. In other words, seeing someone as an object, not as a subject. And of course, women definitely return the favor with men. So, whose fault is it in the material world? Basically everybody. Everyone in this world, men and women, they're all partners in crime. So drishya means to be seen. Or in other words, an object, that which is to be seen, an object of sight. And drishya tvam means the state of being an object of sight or consciousness. So going back to these verses, how are we imposing falsely a quality? Because sky is never cloudy. Space itself is never cloudy, but it contains clouds, and therefore we falsely say the sky is cloudy. The sky is not cloudy. I mean, there are I mean, we know what we mean. There are clouds in the sky, but they're not actually interacting with space. They're just there. And so, similarly, the earthy dust, and the word partiva is there to emphasize that it's a different element. It's not the air element, it's the earth element. From the word prithivi, earth, so partiva, earthly, or earthy. So similarly, the air appears to be like thick with dust, but actually air is a different element. So that's the example. Similarly, we impose on someone like objectiveness in the sense of being the object of my pleasure, the object of my consciousness, but we should see people as subjects, not as objects. And of course we know that if someone, for example, is in some kind of relationship and the other person doesn't gratify you, if a person's detached, you just say, whoops, bad choice. But if someone is attached, due to lust and all that, then there's anger. Because it's just like you get angry if you buy some machine and you plug it in and it doesn't work, you get angry. Because you bought the machine, you spent your hard-earned money so the machine would serve your purpose. And if the machine doesn't serve your purpose, if it's defective, you become angry. And then you have to, of course, have to look at that label you get nowadays. Do not return this product. Please call this number. Sounds like marriage counseling. Anyway, so in that way, if we become angry because someone does not gratify us, it means that we saw that person simply as an object of our pleasure. And we become angry when the person is not functioning properly and not pleasing us. It doesn't mean we should necessarily just accept inappropriate behavior. That's not the point. But if I see that someone is behaving inappropriately, then I may decide that it's not appropriate for me to be with this person if they can't correct their behavior. But the anger, the rage, the crime of passion, all that comes from one's own foolishness. And if we can really see Krishna, I mean, people even do this to God. People are so shameless and foolish. They think God just exists as an object of their pleasure. Like Sunday morning television. I prayed to the Lord, and the Lord gave me all my desires. I now drive a very large, expensive car. Anyway, so that was kind of regionist, wasn't it? Like implying that people with foolish religious ideas speak with a southern accent. Anyway, sorry for the regionalism. I just revealed, right, my bi-coastal prejudice. Anyway, so people even approach God this way. They think that God simply exists, and they become angry at God, like, why didn't God gratify my desires? Well, actually he did, because our real desire is to be happy. We just don't know what real happiness is. And so when God acts, and Krishna acts in a way to bring us real happiness, we can become angry or frustrated or, agnostic, because we had some really idiotic idea of how to become happy, and Krishna is not an idiot. So he's actually kind to us, and instead took us on a path leading to real happiness, and we become angry because God did not give me enough rope to hang myself. So anyway, so that's this verse. I think it's a very interesting verse, and there's a lot of philosophy here. And it was actually Prabhupada's desire that we study this as philosophy, not just as doctrine, not just to memorize slokas and roll them out, appropriately, but actually we're supposed to. And philosophy doesn't simply mean, by the way, according to Prabhupada, to memorize our doctrine. Philosophy means actually developing the ability to reason and to explain Krishna consciousness as a reasonable philosophy. And there's lots of philosophy. I mean, the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam is full of very sophisticated philosophy. We just have to study it in that way. So, any questions on these points? Yes?
Thank you so much.
Oh, microphone. This is the talk show format.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. I have a few questions and a few comments for you. I really liked that point on the Bhuta Bhavana being a tight argument. I had that same intuition that it's the same lexical root, and you worded that very nicely. So that was nice. And then this last point of the subject versus the object. This is something that I recently prayed for greater understanding. So this was really wonderful as well. You explained this nice. So I was thinking, we speak of Krishna as either the supreme object of love or the supreme subject of love. And I'm like, what's the difference? Like, how can I understand?
Well, to say that Krishna is the object of our love means that we are ultimately meant to love Krishna. I mean, the word object can be used in different ways. Like, for example, being objective means just seeing things as they are. So, but if you think of what real love is, love means giving, not taking. Love means giving. And so to say that Krishna is the object of our love means that we should offer everything to Krishna. We should offer our hearts to Krishna, our consciousness to Krishna. So it's understanding something as an object in an opposite way. Not as an object in the sense you go and let's say you buy a can opener, and if you can't get the can open, you want to sue the company. So it's a different sense of being the object.
So that led me to some inquiry. So that there's also tied to the concept of Radha Krishna as the soul of our soul. Something I heard Prabhupada say once in a lecture.
If you had the exact quote, it would be easier, because otherwise even a slight change in wording can make a huge difference.
That was his wording.
Okay. So the soul of our soul, but that's just a common way of using the word. If you say let's say like Handel was the soul of Baroque music or something, which is actually true. But anyway, Bach also, but Beethoven and I agree that
Perhaps
Handel...
I could elaborate context?
Yes. To say that something is the soul of something else means it's like the essence of it, or it's like the purpose of something. And actually, they do this specifically in Sanskrit with the word atmika. I'll explain that as a suffix, or not as a suffix, but as a. Let me explain that. Just like, do you know Spanish at all? Of course, this is Texas, Tex-Mex. So, for example, in Spanish, you can make sort of an affectionate diminutive form of something by adding ito or ita, or in certain phonetic environments, cito or cita. So, you know Spanish? No me digas. So, for example, in Spanish, you can say my daughter, mi hija. But if you say like mi hijita, like my little daughter, it's very affectionate. Mi hijita, or even say like like daddy, padrecito, or something like that. So papacito. So they do the same thing, by the way, in Sanskrit. And in Sanskrit, it's done with either ka or ika. Like, for example, gopika means las gopisitas. So that's actually what gopika means. Or radhika, radhasita, like dear Radha, and so on. So that's how they do it. And so if you apply that to atma, which means the self, like atmika, and they'll say something like, for example, rag atmika, which means, in English, the way you translate it, it's the very self of attachment. The very self of something, which means like the essence. So atmika is used in this way. So getting back to your question, to say that something is the self of something else, like for someone can say, I'm the soul of discretion. That's an old saying. And what that means is that I sort of personify discretion, or I've understood and practiced the essence of discretion. So the word soul in English and in Sanskrit is used in that way. Not always in a complete... It doesn't mean that... I mean, say Krishna is the soul of the soul. It means that, like, Krishna is the essential sustainer, the object of love. It's like the very soul of something.
Yeah, definitely. His talk was helping me see kind of deeper into this, what do you call it, between subject and object, as far as what is our relationship, ontologically you could say, with Radha Krishna. Is it that God exists to fulfill our desires, or we exist to fulfill his desires? And that gets into this, I suppose, a logical fallacy that perhaps you could illuminate me specifically.
Well, clearly...
As far as whose existence is primordial, right?
Well, Krishna, he's the Adi Purusha.
Exactly. But it's
prima is just or primordial is just a synonym for Adi. It means the first. So, in fact, words like previous, prima are actually cognate, related to Sanskrit also. When you do historical linguistics and you're trying to see connections between words, the vowels are kind of often useless because vowels go all over the place. But the consonants are more stable. So, for example, you have the Sanskrit word purva, which in English becomes previous. So you have the PRV. Anyways, little linguistic note. So, yes, we are meant to, but Krishna, but when you love someone, you are happy to see them happy. So Krishna's happy to see us happy, but in the right way, not, trying to seek happiness stupidly. Just like, for example, in Italian, they say, contento tu, contenti tutti, which means if you're happy, everyone's happy. Contento tu, contenti tutti. So it's just like if you love someone, let's say you love a child, because Krishna says in the Gita, Pitamasya Jagato, I'm the father of the universe, Mata and the mother. And so what the greatest happiness for a parent is to see the child happy. If the child is, trying to be happy by taking drugs or stealing from other people, that's not what the parents mean. Parents are happy when they see children being happy in a proper, healthy way, not in some perverse, sick, dangerous way. Like my kid is driving down, in a school zone at 110 miles an hour in the car, but he's happy. So when you love someone, you see them, you're happy when you see them truly happy, appropriately happy. That makes you happy. So Krishna wants to make us happy, and we want to make Krishna happy. And that's what a loving relationship means. It's not just one-sided. It's just like some people think that in the spiritual world, the only romantic relationships are Radha and Krishna. Everyone else just sits in this sort of infinitely big stadium, watching the rasa dance. But actually, in the spiritual world, there are couples. They're boyfriends and girlfriends. But there's no material lust. But some people have natural affinities. I mean, for example, we could assume that, say, between Yashoda and Nanda, they don't say, well, actually, there's nothing really personally between us, but let's just cooperate for our son's sake. Like when a marriage is kind of like run out of gas, well, for the sake of our children, we're going to stay together. So that's not Nanda and Yashoda. I mean, we should assume they actually like each other, and they actually have a certain affinity with each other. And so again, it's not just this infinitely big Rasa Leela stadium in the spiritual world. It's a real world with real people. But there's no lust, and Krishna's in the center. So, any other question? Oh yeah, after this, go to here, and then we'll give you the microphone. Yes.
Hare Krishna. So I had 4 different thoughts, but the first one, the most important one, probably, what you were saying about object and subject and seeing people not as an object of our desires. Something occurred to me recently that it's really nice to be able to see somebody in relation to Gurudev, that this person exists, at least as a stepping stone to get better, because we can't see their soul directly sometimes, but seeing them as connected to Gurudev and us also connected to Gurudev, and our relationship is based through Gurudev, not because of what this person does for me or what I do for them.
Yeah, of course. That's what it means to see someone in relation to Krishna. We see someone in relation to Krishna by seeing them in relation to the pure devotees. So, and then even if the person is, I mean, some people definitely can only be loved at a distance. I mean, some people, even devotees, are really acquired tastes, and so, which you may not acquire in this lifetime. But if we see that someone is actually, if we see that someone is serving Krishna, then we have to accept it. I mean, there's some people who, it's like almost like my worst nightmare would be to be stuck with them on a desert island. But I see that they're serving Krishna, and so therefore I have to respect that and not get in their way and just, you know, let them do their service. So, so in a society where people are different, they have different cultures, they have different psychologies, and you know, we can't expect that everyone is just going to be bubbling over with affection for everybody else in the real world. And some people we do actually have an affinity for. I mean, even among devotees, there's some devotees you really like a lot. You just get along well. It's just it's a match. It's just like we have different tastes in food because we have different chemicals on our tongue. And you know, for example, I cannot stand cilantro, and I don't mean to offend anyone who loves cilantro, but there's a certain percentage of people in the world that can't stand the taste of just the way their chemicals are on their tongue. So that's real surrender. If someone is doing service for Krishna, and they may not be, you know, my favorite person, but I understand. I have to respect their service and not impede their service, and just, and that's also surrender. That actually means that you're serious about Krishna.
So second thought, based a little bit on what you said just now, regarding what's here about seeing it, that some people, when they're very ignorant or unable to see things clearly, sometimes we show them the great form of the Vishwarupa and stuff like that. Can we, as Vaishnavas, consider that some of these sort of more fundamental scientists are trying to find the Vishwarupa of the universe?
I don't think they're looking for some cosmic deity.
No, but
some of them are.
They do have that impulse within them to find
some of them
something.
are. Well, I think it's not so much that they're looking for a form of God, although some of them are actually. Actually, it turns out that over half of all scientists believe there's something beyond matter. So they're not all stupid. But the universe, I mean, it's just amazing because Krishna made it. I always remember, like, in terms of, I'll give you an example. I had a little Vishwarupa experience. One time when I was at New Dwarka, the LA temple, and this must be like 40 years ago or something. So obviously I was 9 years old. Very powerful childhood memory. Anyway, must have been 40 years ago, I was in New Dwarka, and which, as you know, is sort of right by Venice Boulevard there. And so along Venice Boulevard, which is a main artery, and it goes, you know, all the way from downtown to the beach. And so they had this gas pipeline under the street. And so something happened, the pipeline ruptured, and there was this, it kind of burst, and just this, to use biblical language, this like pillar of fire. It really was like a pillar of fire, just swirled up into the sky. And it must have been about 100 feet high or something. I mean, it was like this great pillar of fire just burning up, you know, going into the sky and swirling around. And of course, they called out half the LA Fire Department. They actually commandeered, they took over one of what's the BBT building on Watsika and used it sort of as a command headquarters. It was such a big thing. But what I found interesting, and this is related to the Vishwarupa, is that, of course, on the other side of Venice, Culver City, there's all kinds of office buildings, Sony, and now they have even more studios, and hospitals. And so hundreds and hundreds of people that worked in those buildings just rushed out of the buildings because they were just agape. They were just astonished by this display of natural power. And so this huge crowd of people formed at a safe distance, just mesmerized just by the power of nature. This huge pillar of fire. And I remember the universal form. So it's not that people are thinking, oh yeah, in India and what they think is Hinduism, there's descriptions of the universal form, so let's go look for it. No. I mean, they've never, but the idea is that the universe itself is just, what's the word? It's hard to find the right word. It's just staggering by its immensity, by its power, like with this Webb telescope now. I mean, the fact that, if they're right, and, God only knows that they got it right, because 100 years from now they may kind of laugh at what people thought the universe was now. But, if they're right, then when you look in the night sky, or look through that telescope, you're actually looking a billion years back in time. And so the idea that something can move 186,000 miles a second, I mean, you can get whiplash from that, 186,000 miles per second, and it takes a billion years at that speed to reach the Earth. I mean, our brains are actually not built to even process that. We know what the words mean, but you can't really form a picture of that. It's too big. Or, for example, the idea of Krishna just wrapping up a universe, a whole universe, cosmic destruction. Not literally annihilation, because nihil means nothing, so, to become nothing. But annihilation, you could say it is annihilation in the sense that, like, where did that universe go? It's somewhere else, it's in Mahavishnu's body. So the universe itself, or if you look at it, it's now become mathematically, not theologically, but mathematically absurd to say that there's no higher power that created the universe. Because when we look at, say, take microbiology, when we look at what's going on inside cells, it is so, it's like a galaxy a billion light years away. It's so sophisticated, it is so amazingly advanced in terms of technology that it just boggles the mind. And so, so the mathematical odds that this could occur by itself without some higher intelligence are basically zero. So it's mathematically absurd to say that the universe created itself. Plus, the Big Bang could not have occurred according to the laws of nature, because before the Big Bang, there were no laws of nature. So anyway, so more and more people are understanding how idiotic it is to say that the universe built itself. But actually, it's getting late, so maybe we better stop here. And if you had further questions, send me a very generous check, and I may respond to you by email. Just kidding, that was a joke. So, thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.